Welcome to the bench. There you go. That intro?
Yeah, that sounds good enough.
No, there you go.
All right, episode 9, powered by Wildhead. Yeah, we're back.
Hey.
I'm coming to you live from the...
And twitch.tv/automatic jack.
What? Yeah, well, that guy is randomly plugging himself in our intro of the podcast. We're at the Alienware... I'm at the Alienware training facility in Santa Monica. Squishy and Growl are... Yeah, Growl is actually progressing Nexus Princess Kaiveza.
And I'm at my home.
Welcome. Yeah, so basically we're going to be talking about, everything that's been happening this most recent week. A lot of people have been talking about Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus being very difficult, I think. Caught a lot of people off guard, even though we were trying to tell people in advance that it was going to be really hard. It still seemed to be surprising to a bunch of different people. But yeah, the season started. How have you guys been feeling about the season so far? Are you guys geared?
I've already had to switch mains like 4 times. I started as Prez, and then our Disc Priest quit the guild the day before the raid came out, and then I switched to Disc Priest. And then Liquid showed up not playing Disc Priest, and now I'm playing Holy Priest. And then I showed up to Keys, and Dorky said, "Where's your Shaman?" So my gear's kind of spread across a lot of different characters, but we're getting there.
What's your most geared guy?
My Priest is like 619 right now.
Nice. For me, I've been having a lot of fun doing keys. I've done a crap ton of keys, and I think I'm only like 617, but Dev fucking owns right now.
Will you
fun.
play Dev and Keys?
When I'm not forced into AUG, yeah. But a lot of time when 10 plus, I get forced into AUG, so.
Wait, Growl 2-chested in 11.
Yeah. Arakara. I'm not surprised.
We haven't been going above 10. I mean, there are some people that are like pushing for fun or whatever, but I think pretty much everybody in every group still needs loot somewhere, so there's not really a lot of incentive. Even a lot of people need like gilded crests or whatever still, so when you deplete a key and you get 5 gilded crests, it feels so bad.
Yeah.
Dude, my gear is poverty right now. I'm 609 item level, no tier. Still haven't crafted yet, but I'm ramping. I'm getting all my 10s done for the week. That's the most important thing for me, is that I get all my 10s done.
Yeah, how many are you at right now?
5, 6? I think I'm at 6.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's not too bad. You guys see this drama randomly that Jinji tweeted out about?
Oh, we love drama.
Yeah, we love drama. So apparently, there's a bug with Spellslinger Arcane Mage, where if they cast on a focus target permanently, pressing focused abilities, they stack infinite Spellslinger Splinter stacks, and then apparently they use the on-use trinket to proc all the Spellslinger Splinter stacks at once, and do a lot of damage to the boss. Definitely not intended. Genji not very happy about this.
Yeah, I mean, so part of it is not just the damage, but it's the execute part of it. So like in a lot of boss fights, it's like, the beginning gets, they solve the beginning, and then the end of the fight is where things get really hard, and so you can kind of like delay the damage. And so basically what they're doing is just like you said, the way Spellslinger works is it has like a dot that builds up, and then the capstone like breaks it. But apparently if you're not targeting the mob, it will never break the dots, and you can just stack it up a bunch of times, and then you can basically delay it. And we don't know the exact details. I mean, it's, some amount of damage that matters, but it doesn't matter. And yeah, and we're seeing the drama already unfold, and it's definitely glorious. I mean, the thing is, it's just annoying because, like, I feel like I'm gonna get labeled as a Liquid fanboy or whatever for this, but like, it's so hard to draw the line between what's a bug and what isn't, and like, I don't know, like, this is definitely a bug, but I mean, there are also some weird interactions with Arcane. Like, for example, Nether Precision, like the main thing that you do is Arcane Mage. Like, you have a buff that you either buff your single target or your AoE spell, but if you queue them together, it buffs both, and that's just like, that's how you play Arcane Mage. You just use the same buff into 2 different spells, and it's like that class is already like really, really weird with like clipping channeled spells and all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. This is definitely I don't know. I don't even know what to say at this point. I think it's really funny, though, that after Echo gets, like, not just Echo, but Method and other people got banned for the Severed Threads bug, and everyone's like, all right, nice, finally Blizzard's handing out some punishment. We just have already some sort of nonsense with someone bug abusing on a boss.
I mean, would you I wouldn't expect anybody to ever get banned for something like this, though, right? I mean, I've seen some complete nonsense that's happened over time, and very rarely do they actually hand out bans for. I would describe it as like spec or class bugs in that regard, right? Like I'm thinking like raw den. You guys remember people mass resetting raw den over and over again to be able to get 100% metamorphosis uptime and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair though, there was nothing bugged about that other than the respawn time of the boss was just way too low. This one, I think, the way that you have to do it, you are not you have to knowingly set this up. It's not just gonna happen randomly. You kind of have to know what's going on, and you're doing something weird. And I think that leads it a little more for me personally into exploit territory, and I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard does something about it. Will they do something about it? I don't actually know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Like a ban or like a?
I don't know. I mean, we're in a
It's actually. It's crazy that you word it like that, because if you talk about the severed threads thing, number one, that like doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Number two, you can actually like do that on accident. A lot of people did actually proc that on accident. Like, while it's true that a lot of them probably knew what they were doing, you could have, there were people that got caught in the crossfire allegedly. Yeah. There's no way that you're going through the whole raid fight not targeting the boss as a mage. Like, this is 100% you know the way the interaction is supposed to work, and you're trying to do something to avoid the way it's supposed to work. And I mean, it's pretty wild.
The way
they're never going to ban like. They're never banning Squishy's mage for doing this in a random raid, though, right? Because they wouldn't even know that he's doing it. They don't even have the data to know that he's exploiting this in this way, right?
Theoretically, but I mean, they could maybe know. I mean, the way I've explained exploits in the past is usually about intent. If they can prove without a doubt and find a way to prove without a doubt that people are doing things intentionally, they will likely take action, especially because we're in a new age of bans or whatever. We'll see what they do. I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard actually takes action on this, even if it's minuscule, just to solidify their stance on stop exploiting. But whether or not they actually do, I don't know. I could see Blizzard doing that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because realistically, nothing mattered.
Up for debate. Yo, by the way, why are servers crashing every day? What's going on with that?
The game's popping, maybe. I don't know. Maybe tons and tons of people are playing. To be honest, I haven't had any problems. I know some people have. Is it an Illidan thing or what? But I haven't had any server problems.
Thing, right?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we were on Zul'jin, which is, a decently high pop servers. No Area 52, but our first two raid nights were bricked at exactly raid time for a good 10 to 15 minutes, and it was just like super frustrating.
That did happen to us. That did happen to us a couple days ago. I think Wednesday our raid night got bricked, not bricked, but like we lost like 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever at the start of the raid because people couldn't log in. And yeah, that's, I mean, frustrating, but it's like, again, it's like week one. I don't know. Maybe I'm too forgiving with that sort of thing, but I think it's sort of par for the course for the new launch. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe everyone's just really, really enjoying Grim Batol and Necrotic Wake and all of the raid fights, and it's just popping off right now. Surely, right?
Grim Batol, Pog. What a good dungeon to bring back.
I actually really like that dungeon.
Do we start with dungeons or do we start with the raid?
I feel like the raid is maybe the most natural segue, but I'm down for either. I think both are fun.
All right, fair enough. I'll start. I've actually super enjoyed the raid so far. Now, granted, the more pulls the boss has, generally, the less I like it. I know there's some people that just love Fyrak and Tindril and 500 pull boss, and they're like, oh, we accomplished this. And it's like, to me, the perfect boss length is like somewhere between 5 to 50 pulls, where you spend a little bit of time, you learn the mechanics, you learn the overlaps, and then you kind of get it done. Like one raid night or maybe two for like a hard boss. So this to me is like the most fun part of a raid prog, like the last couple bosses of Heroic, the first couple bosses of Mythic, just kind of like learn the basic mechanics. Oh, okay, like this fight, now we got to do this. Overall, I think the raid fights, this is definitely a healer POV, but I think the raid fights seem pretty well designed. There's not everything seems like reasonably fair. There's like some amount of personal responsibility, but it's not crazy. You get to like the end bosses like Silken Court and Queen Ansarak.
Yeah.
And there's definitely some like, one person can wipe the raid, but really, all the other bosses, it's like, you know, I don't know. I overall I've been really enjoying the raid. How about you guys?
Have you guys pulled Brood Twister or Nexus Princess at all? Yep.
No, we're only on the what is it, Rashanon? We haven't killed that boss yet. We haven't really done that many
Both you guys
pulls.
are on Raftanon?
Yeah, we one-shot Sikran, and then it was end of raid time. So we have 2 more days on Rashnet into the brick wall.
Yeah. I guess. So early prog, how have you guys felt about the bosses? Do you think the bosses are exceeding your expectations? Because I think that like Squishy, I think they're like right on episode 2 or episode 3. You were talking about the raid not looking super sick for you. Have you changed your opinion on that?
They're fine. The first boss sucks. It's a 9-minute single target encounter that doesn't really do much because it has infinite health for some stupid reason. And like, okay, I guess. And then the second boss is like a 6-minute one. That one was actually kind of fun in my opinion. And then the third boss, Sikran, the DPS check is so lenient on that. I'm pretty sure we had a good 15 people dead and killed the boss. So
nice.
The first 4 seem to be tuned really low. And as everybody knows, the last 4 seem to be tuned really high.
Yeah, so am I going to be able to plug the first 4 in like an LFG group?
Maybe
That's the only thing I care about, I think.
Maybe down the line.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this happens. I don't know if they do this on purpose, but it seems like this happens quite a bit where the first boss tends to be kind of like the wall boss, and then if you can get the first boss down, then chances are you can get a couple more easy bosses down too. Not all raids are like that, but I actually think the first boss is probably the one that is just the most like, you know, if you have people that can actually stay focused and do the mechanics and not feed for 10 minutes, then they'll be able to handle the other ones. And it is cross realm off the bat, so I mean we could already be pugging and yeah, I mean you definitely need good people that are geared. The thing is, gear is just a little bit slowed down right now, so I think people are not like if you played Dragonflight, people are not quite at the level of gear that they might expect or feel like they should be. So you kind of go into these bosses on like your ult, and it's like, yeah, your ult's not that strong to be doing mythic bosses yet.
Is the first boss kind of looks like somewhere based like Rathian, if you guys remember that fight where it ends up being 10 minutes or whatever, but as you get more gear you're able to like beat some of those phases.
Hopefully. I hope so.
Do you think that you can't beat them? Do you think you can't beat them? Oh my god.
I mean, right now I don't know about your guild, Growl. I think we killed it on the halfway through the 4th phase.
Yeah, oh my God. That sounds about right. I think early 4th for us too.
So maybe we can cut out that the 3rd intermission, but like,
yeah, it'll still be a drag. It'll still be, well. Also, I mean, keep in mind you go all like it seems like we're very geared, but 6 of 6 myth is like what 639. So I mean, technically we still have a lot of item levels to go. So even though it feels like we're geared,
most guilds have about 20 some odd item levels to be able to gain, and you're going to be getting stacking Severed Strands buff in a couple of weeks. When does it start, Squishy?
It's a month after the raid releases, I think.
So 2 weeks from now?
I think so, but it could be a month from when Mythic releases. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, well, who knows?
Something around there.
Yeah, okay. Kind of interesting. I've also seen this tweet by our own co-host Squishy. It says, watching Brood Twister, and I'm honestly wondering how much harder the next couple bosses are going to be. Then I'm wondering how the heck any non-reasonable first guild is supposed to kill this boss this week. There's been some, I would describe it as questionable tuning of both Brood Twister and Nexus Princess. Not for the Racial First guilds, because I think it's been an interesting Racial First viewing experience, but I think it's been very questionable for guilds like your guys' guilds, where there's just absolutely no shot that you guys are killing it until you're 630, 635, maybe even potentially, with the amount of coordination and gear that's required for this fight. I don't really know what's supposed to go on. I think that they need to be looking to nerf both of these bosses on the reset by like a lot, especially since how difficult the first 4 bosses were. Less than 20 combined pulls for the first 4, and then 200 pulls per boss for the next 2. That just seems there's something wrong there.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of this. Like right now, we had a Mirdraso which had, 6 bosses that were relatively easy. Then you had a giant spike in Smolderon, another giant spike in Tindril, and then another giant spike into Farak. This one, you have 4 bosses on like a really, really same level like here. And then you have everything else up here. And it's just Like
Yes.
you're gonna have a lot of guilds who are just going to be tied for 5th place because no one can kill this goddamn slug.
Now, no hate to Kalamazoo, but I don't think that Kalamazoo is ever killing Blue Twister in this current like state of the tuning of this fight.
Wow.
I was just like watching his guild, and it's just like, dude, this is. They're like calling off their raid knights and shit like that because they know that they're not killing this boss with this current tuning. They need like 15 item levels worth of more gear. It's crazy. And I think that this runs into the same issue that maybe like Tendril and Fyrak had last year, where it's like pretty clearly tuned for the race world first. I just hope that Blizzard doesn't fall into the same issue where they just don't nerf the bosses fast enough.
They need to nerf the boss on the reset. I think Brute Twister as a coordination check is great. Like knocking, gripping, stunning, kicking, great. Just shave like a good 20% health off of the boss and make it like an ad killing fight, and I think we can maybe call it good. I think that's kind of my issue. It's not only a coordination check of all these things that your raid has to do, but also you have to maintain incredible amounts of single target on the boss.
Yeah, I think they missed a little bit with tuning. It's hard to say. I hear things like, oh, they tune for Race to World first or whatever. Like, ultimately, we just don't really know. Sometimes it might just be a miss. I think, maybe I would have liked to see the earlier bosses slightly harder, and then this boss obviously needs to be slightly easier. I don't know. I think I guess we'll just sort of have to wait and see. But yeah, I think that these bosses could probably be toned down, and I'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
That being said, I think that isn't really that big of a problem, and I also think like, I don't know, like, maybe Gil, like I'm starting to like cook this weird kind of random theory that like the way like WoW is almost kind of making things really difficult and like separating itself from the people who are like very, very serious and the people that just want to chill. And I feel like there's like this area of like, I don't want to call them like, I don't know, like tryhards or whatever, like meta slaves or like people that aren't quite, like video guilds or whatever. Like, I don't know, like maybe your guild just shouldn't be raiding 12 hours a week and shouldn't be killing, or, you know what I mean? Shouldn't be doing, I'm not naming any guilds or any names, and I may or may not be a part of a guild like that, but like maybe these guilds just shouldn't be raiding 4 nights and doing splits and trying to guarantee tier on week 1, right? It may be like, either you got to get good and be like a really serious guild that can take down this boss, or like, they're sort of like diminishing the value of raiding a lot, if that makes sense. Like,
Sure.
Raiding 12 hours or 16 hours isn't really going to help you that much, and I don't even think that's that bad of a thing, is it?
It's not inherently a bad thing, but I do think it's a bit awkward whenever. So say Roshanon was harder. I think that this argument could actually make a lot more sense if Roshanon was harder, and Blizzard was basically like, yeah, I mean, you're not going to get to Brood. You're not going to basically kill Brood Twister Nexus Princess with 620 item level unless you're a race world first guild. But you're also going to get stuck on Roshanon and actually have to prog that fight, right? And they actually slow you down a little bit to the point where you're, like you're saying, you're able to actually get the gear to be able to meet the check and beat that check easily. And I think that that's maybe the key piece that's missing here for something like that to be fine, because once you have that Severed Strands buff and once you have all this gear, those fights become a decent amount easier. I mean, that's not always, but like in general, they should become at least a decent amount easier. But like whenever you factor in the fact that about 1,000 guilds per tier get cutting edge, I just don't see a world where 1,000 guilds are actually able to kill Brood Twister Nexus Princess looking like this.
Yeah, I mean, okay, like, yeah, these bosses are too hard. Like, I definitely agree with that, but, and again, maybe I'm going to get blown up in the comments for this, but I actually think the idea of, like, oh, well, like, we're stuck on this boss, like, let's gear up, let's do some Mythic Plus, let's come back on Tuesday. I just don't really think that's such a bad thing. Like, I'm totally okay with that.
I agree with that, but I think part of it is, like, these are penultimate or final boss difficulty bosses that are just, like, at slots 5 and 6 of an 8 boss raid, and I think that that's maybe the part that I'm struggling with a little bit. I do agree in part of saying like, oh yeah, gearing up will help, but I mean, what item level is your guys' guild right now? Like 617 on average whenever you're pulling a boss, 616 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're going to be literally the same item level that Echo and Liquid are this reset, next reset, and they're not killing this boss. You're sure as hell not killing this boss.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Growl. I think it's totally normal to be like, okay, we can't kill this boss right now. Let's spend this time going to Mythic Plus again, getting our upgrades.
Yeah.
But the problem is, we're like, at least my guild is just gonna get hardwalled this week. I don't think there's any way we can get the level of gear that we need. If we had perfect drops for Mythic Plus, the lack of farmable gear that increases our eye level is not. It doesn't exist.
The thing is, like, you need a lot of myth track gear to be able to get to that point that Grau was talking about, where you're actually overgearing it. Which I think that both sides are right, but yeah, I think that you're right in some aspects, Grau. I don't think that the comments necessarily should give you a hard time for this opinion. I do think that in general, people like to immediately start complaining about bosses getting nerfed whenever they have to have some adversity, which I'm not a huge fan of. Just generally, I'd rather, but these at the same point, I'm thinking about like about 1,000 guilds get cutting edge every tier. This fight might be a little bit over the line for what they were looking for in terms of tuning.
Yeah, it's just so hard because on one hand, it's just like you said, you don't want to just jump to conclusions right away and be like, cry for the nerf bat. But at the same time, like, you have a guild like Liquid that is so serious and so well planned and so well put together, and Echo and Method, and obviously, right, that like they're just gonna do better than any of our guilds could possibly in the entire tier, like in this first week, right?
Even at 639 item level, right?
Yeah, so it's like I definitely agree with what you're saying. Like, you kind of look at that and you're just like, okay, well, I don't know. I don't really mind. I was actually listening to an old interview back, like, about Sepulcher, actually, and I really love the idea of, like, them not giving info about bosses and bosses not being tested and, like, people figuring them out as you get to them, like, more discovery, less fine. You know what I mean? And I think that, unfortunately, with that territory comes with, like, a little bit rough around the edges design or tuning, but I'm okay with that world, like, bosses being kind of weird on the first week, and, like, again, if you want to be that omega sweaty nerd that's trying to kill the boss, and again, we're talking about a very small percentage of the player base here that's running into Brood Twister on week 1. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not a major issue that's affecting that many players, I think, to the point where, like, but again, it's not to say that it's not to excuse the bad tuning.
And I'm not like, oh yeah, Blizzard fumbled the bag here, because I think that for me too, it's kind of cool whenever you're watching Race World First Guild Frog fights like this. It's more about how Blizzard then responds in the future, and it's kind of like, I think we saw this with Halandris. Was it a problem that Halandris was that hard? I mean, maybe you can make an argument that it was a problem that Halandris was that hard, but I think it was a problem that they kept Halandris that hard for that long. Same with Central Sage Swift. Like, was it a problem that the Race World First kill of that was that hard? I don't think so. But was it a problem that it was that difficult still a month into the patch, or a month whenever everybody else's guild was getting there? I think that was the bigger issue for me.
Yeah. You mentioned something really interesting. It's just like, non-testable bosses. I would totally be in favor of them actually encrypting it, encrypting all those until the day of. I think, like, even for like the general player base, I think that'd be really cool, because right now you're expected to know what every boss does before the raid even comes out, and that's not exciting or fun for the majority of people. And therefore, from a developer point of view, the only way to challenge players is very few things. Is like the mechanics and raw throughput. There is no thing of discovery strategy stuff, like, especially watching Race to World First, no one really has that discovery phase anymore, other than the top 1 or 2 guilds. And compared to other Race to World First, in Final Fantasy, Destiny, Lost Ark, other games, it's really cool to see how strategies and stuff are discovered and fleshed out over time. And I think that is an aspect that I think would be really cool to watch the Race to World First guilds go into a boss completely blind and be able to figure it out. Alongside, if you want to, you could go in completely blind and try to figure it out. So I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I do you think that they could actually ever get to a point where it's either only normal or only heroic testing for the bosses? Because I think the issue is, like, and I think they've said this before, they worry about their quality assurance on fights that are just, like, completely untested, and that's why they only are able to, like, really do it for one boss a tier. I wonder if they could actually do heroic or normal testing only, and then just, like, save that mythic to, like you're saying. And I think that and then, like, you encrypt the mythic mechanic or something like that.
I would just do all or nothing at that point, personally. If encrypt it all, try it for a tier, it might fail horribly, put extra resources into it. Like, I know that's not easy, that's easy for me to say, but, like, I think it might be worth it for a tier to try that different thing.
Blind Prog is really cool. I think that blind progging WoW would actually be really cool, I think. Also,
It's funny to think that
play.
nobody, like, does anybody do that?
Not in WoW.
Like WoW probably has like some of the most creative and interesting raid design. Like part of what makes WoW raiding, I think, cool or interesting is the fact that it is 20-man and the fact that there's so many different specs and there's like, you know, all these different types of fights. Like, I'm not saying it's the best rating. You know, there's definitely a lot of other good rating games, but a lot of those other games like Final Fantasy, Lost Ark are much more streamlined, you know, like single target boss, and you sort of know the gist of it. It's just like difficult mechanics. Whereas WoW, I feel like has more problem solving and like thinking and decision making and planning than any other game. Yet literally nobody ever even considers trying to do it blind. I feel like doing WoW, that would be like an interesting experiment. Maybe when I'm washed and I'm no longer caring about my gear, I run that experiment. I feel like that would be, I mean, you know what's crazy thinking? Maybe Mythic is just literally too hard. Like maybe you literally couldn't do it. Like I'm trying to think of, imagine getting a group of 20 people who are in like, you know, not super crazy gear, doing fully blind, like not knowing what any of the bosses do. Like I feel like it would just be like a 3-month long experiment. You know, like I don't know, maybe that's why. Like maybe WoW rating is just literally too hard to do that.
I mean, it's literally just because I think that's the only way that the developers can challenge people. If part of the of Mythic Prog was figuring out how to do the boss fight, I don't think they would need to challenge people as hard with the throughput checks. That's kind of my take on it.
Could be cool. I agree though. I think that the sentiment of it would also make, I think, for a better, more broad prog experience if you were blind progging the entire tier.
Yeah, so overall, raid good. It's a little sharp. You know, you go from normal and heroic, I think is like first 6 bosses are pretty easy. Or I guess heroic Brood Twister is a little tough, but it's like, you know, all 3 difficulties, it feels like you definitely hit a wall where bosses go from reasonable to very difficult, and I wish that was like a little bit smoother, but other than that, I've been enjoying the fights.
You know, one of the things that I'm most excited about is to watch Queen Ansarek on Mythic. Like that mechanic, I don't know. I don't know if you've seen the Dungeon Journal, but the way it works is if you've done heroic, you know there's 2 froths. The mechanic on Mythic is the froths cannot pop within a second of each other, and the assumption is there's going to be 4 or 5 froths.
5 seems to be the common sentiment around here.
So you're gonna have like a nice conga line of froths going off in sequence, and I think it's just gonna look so cool.
Dude, what have you guys thought about raid tuning this tier so far? I mean, we kind of talked about the class tuning that we had from last reset. Like, as guys who've been like inside the raid and stuff like that, what have you guys actually been thinking about the tuning of the specs?
Preservation Evoker is fair and balanced.
Preservation Evoker is very fair and very balanced. That's a very good point, Grell. Jack, what do you think about Pres Evoker?
So unexpected how well it's performing. It's crazy. Who knew?
Yeah.
Who possibly knew that Pres Evoker was going to be good?
Damn, look at this. Look at this fucking chasm between all the other healers and Pres.
Pres Evoker is actually really, really funny because of how insanely simple it is. Like previously, Pres and a little bit of M Plus is built off of like all these like sort of like combos and like ways that spells interact. And this current like build basically revolves around the capstone of one of the hero talent trees, and you don't really do anything. Like you almost have to be stupider to play Pres in the raid, because every single time I talk to someone like, I can't figure this out, I'm not doing healing. It's like, no, stop trying to do all this stuff. Just press Dream Breath and then press your button and then it does big healing. And they're like, oh. And then you just press one. You're basically doing a disc ramp with one button. You just press it, and then it just like bam, just 2 million HPS instantly. It's so fun to watch Nick's POV in raid, where he just jumps up like 50 million healing in one button.
Dude, side note, what's going on with tanks and raid? Why does every raid fight just smolder your tank? What is going on? I feel like I never see tanks take a lot of damage in raid. In this tier, I feel like has had more tank damage than the last like 3 raids combined.
That's definitely a thing I think that they've been trying to work on. historically
Yeah.
tanking has been like the not really easy role, but like just like you just show up and you press your buttons and like you're kind of just doing your own thing sort of role. And like the hard part is like, you know, knowing where to put the boss and like doing the mechanics, but it's never really like rotationally demanding.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're sort of trying to change that. And I don't know. I guess maybe Squishy has some input. I'm interested. I know you're playing a lot more Evoker this season, but also one thing I wanted to point out is I feel like it's got to be so tough to design good tank mechanics because like they've had hundreds of bosses in the game by now. Like how many different tank mechanics can you make?
Yeah.
But I actually think the tank mechanic on what is it, the blood horror guy, has to be one of the coolest mechanics where it's like the other realm is in the shadow, or the other team is in the shadow realm, and you have to like face the boss in a way so that the beams spawn and that gives them the most space. Maybe it's annoying or whatever, but if to me that was like, oh, this was a cool, like, I'm surprised they cooked this up. This was like pretty creative.
I mean, like Ross said before, tanks were kind of just only survivability was not a concern. It was really easy to survive with what you had. You just purely geared damage the entire time, and over time they've started kind of going more and more into defensive. People started wearing absorb trinkets, defensive trinkets, because they started making them better, and also made them do damage because that's what people want to do anyways. Yeah, they've really amped it up this tier in my opinion. I think like the Mythic Queen Ansurek healing absorb is like 43 million or something crazy now. It's a massive healing absorb.
Dude, that Yips guy is like hanking all the tank busters on Nexus Princess, and that guy's got like mad bags under his eyes, and he just like shows up to every meal and he's like, "This is the hardest fight I've ever tanked."
Yeah, all the tank busters fucking own this raid. It is. You definitely want good tanks. Like you always want good tanks for positioning, but you need survivable tanks now too.
Kind of interesting. And then from a DPS perspective, it seems like every spec in the game was at least tried on Brood Twister in some capacity. I don't know. How's raid DPS balance felt from you guys?
I mean,
I don't know.
I was gonna ask you why Boomkin on Brood Twister. Moonkid showed up. What's going on with that, Tettles?
Well, you gotta get Mark of the Wild from somewhere, and it's not gonna be from your tank because they benched him. You gotta play double blood DK, otherwise you have to 3-tank that boss. What a weird phenomenon, by the way.
Yeah.
So you gotta get Mark of the Wild from somewhere.
Well, that's what's crazy, right? We're talking about tanks. Normally, before it's like you just bring whatever. Like people, like they went into the raid, and they might still carry through with this, right? With this Brewmaster Bear, but now you know they're getting to the bosses, and they're like, wait a second, like we can't play Bear on this boss, like, or you know, oh, we need this tank or whatever. Like,
the Bear is getting fucking murdered.
Yep. Yes.
Which that's weird.
I mean, Blood DK I think is just always going to be a popular like tank choice because you heal yourself, and I'm pretty sure the majority of healers don't like healing tanks. So Blood DK is always going to be a popular. I think most people are running some combination of Blood DK and, you know, either Guardian or Brewmaster as we previously predicted. But I think Brood Twister has been so finely tuned that you've seen the power of AoE cooldowns from Frost DK and Fury Warrior just being so up there. While like on single target bosses, you have stuff like Dev Evoker, you know, kind of pump, and BM Hunter kind of pumping. So I think there's like a good mix. There are still some specs that are struggling near the bottom, but I think just they almost have a very wide array of fights, which kind of, in a way, shake up the class diversity a little.
I think I know Frosty Cape because of that one boss, by the way.
Who knows, man? I think it's also interesting to note that Aug Evoker, some representation, but not as much as I was expecting.
I think it's impossible to tell how good or bad that spec is, which is part of the problem.
I mean,
or it's a good thing.
I think the dev buffs just tried to force them out of the meta. Just like they were like, we don't want Aug, we don't want to deal with Aug, so let's just buff dev enough that all those evokers can just play dev. But I don't know.
So there was a gosh, I don't remember the guy's name.
Hat and half. Oh my god, I'm just sitting here thinking about that. That is insane. Go.
The what's the devs that were on the interview with Nagura? One of them mentioned very specifically the idea that if they're like part of their thought process going forward is if a class is really good for a while, they're just going to make sure it's not good. Like, they didn't outright say that, but I feel like I kind of picked that up from that interview, that they were basically like, okay, we're just going to acknowledge that there's always going to be a FODM, and we're just going to like kind of push it around. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, that. And I don't know, I've had back and forth about this. Like, I've heard people really vehemently dislike the idea of like not being able to tell how good or bad a class is, or like having logs not be super transparent. But personally, I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing in the world. And I think that part of the joy of playing, like for instance, playing tanker healer, is that you can do a run like a key and not really feel like you're being compared or judged or whatever. Like when you're a DPS, you're always just looking at your damage and comparing it with the other people in your group and like, you know, trying to do better or whatever. But as a tanker healer, you're like can be more focused on just doing mechanics and stuff. And I think that having a class where your straight up throughput is obfuscated isn't really the end of the world. And I think that, and maybe not to segue into dungeons immediately, but I feel like that's the direction they're heading with what they want out of a lot of people, is like, do the mechanics, play the game, don't just be trying to be a monkey, because that's what's sort of happening to people in M+ right now. I feel like they're trying to be monkeys and do damage, and they just wipe, and then the death timer is murdering them.
So what I'm going to say about AUG specifically is I feel like there's a difference between AUG and Mythic Plus and an AUG and Raid. I think that because like just dynamically how you're looking at Raid progression, you know, you're looking at logs, you're looking at trying to how to improve these specific things, and you're trying to improve your own performance in Raid. For Mythic Plus, I tend to agree that it's a lot more vibey. Like we're looking on focusing on like, can I time this key first and foremost, and then, you know, how does my damage feel secondarily? But I think that for me, it's like the fact that you can't actually come up with any reliable data for Raid for AUG. That seems like it's a little bit of a problem, and I think it's also the issue to me comes down to the fact that it's like the only spec that's like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Those are just my thoughts on it. All right.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like what I mentioned a little bit earlier about the whole idea, like, oh, either get good or play casually, but stop trying to like ride the line. Like, you know what I mean? Like, either be good enough that you understand and you do tests and you figure out how good AUG is, or stop caring so much about how good it is. You know, like that's basically like, oh, I want the information to be spoon fed to me about the exact data on classes, but I also don't want to do the work myself and figuring it out. You know, like I think I it's kind of weird. I don't know if I'm totally right on this, but it does seem like a lot of the things they're doing is like, you know, like either take, what is the phrase, like take the heat or get out of the kitchen or whatever. I feel like that's kind of what they're doing, is they're really putting pressure on that, like, you know, pseudo competitive like middle ground people in WoW right now. And like I think the people who are like super casuals, who are just like vibing and doing delves or whatever, are having a great time. I think the raiders and like the top level Mythic Plus people are having a great time, and I think like the people who are trying to work up the ladder or like wanting to ride the line are really struggling. You know, sort of like everyone's stuck on the fourth boss of Mythic, or, you know, people are trying to do 9 or 10 keys and pugging them and just like failing miserably. And again, I don't know if it's intentional, but it kind of seems like that's what's happening.
Keys nuclear, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I guess let's segue to Mythic Plus. Okay, so I've been trying to pug some keys whenever I have some free time in between casting, and goddamn, it is impossible to time anything above like a 7. In a pug.
Yep.
And then I get invited to a group of either Vesper Guild people, friends. I play with Trell, and my guy's gear fucking sucks. I'm like 6-10 item level, 0 pieces of tier. We have other people who are 6-10 item level, 0 pieces of tier, and we're time in 10s. And then I'm just like, dude, the skill disparity between pugs and people who are like sweating on the beta or have a lot of gear feels incredibly high this season, and it's so brutal right now. This is probably the hardest week 1 I've ever seen. Maybe it's similar to the Dragonflight season 1 week 1, but goddamn, they have overtuned a lot of these bosses.
I don't know.
You can go ahead.
I think overtuned might be the wrong word. They have a lot of mechanics that are very punishing.
Car, you want to take it?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, holy crap, are things punishing. Like, just like you said, I needed like a certain amount of rating to get KSM on one of my alts, and I was like, oh, I need a Stonevault, and someone in my chat's like, oh, I got a 7 Stonevault, we can pug this, and we just like grab some people from Group Finder or whatever. Things are going okay, and like we're on the council boss, and I like make one mistake, and our whole team just explodes instantly, and the key's depleted, and it's just like, I just did that. You know, it wasn't even like my, you know, oh, these guys are so bad. My team, like, I just, you know, made one small mistake, you know, one quick lapse of judgment and, like, messed up a sequence of spells and healing, and then we just died. And it's like, gosh, things are just so unbelievably punishing. Obviously, if you have a group that's doing a ton of damage, you can afford to wipe, you know, once or twice, or afford to have stuff that happens. Not having a B-res or whatever can be also detrimental. I feel like people are playing with a lot of scuffed comps right now, and it's sort of just play with whatever, and people aren't really fully thinking, like, okay, I'm going into Grim Batol, we need to have 2 Curse Dispels. Also, we need to have a battle res. Like, also, we need to have enough kicks. Like, which is, I think Blizzard definitely wants you to do that, and I think they're happy punishing you for not thinking about what team you're walking into the dungeon with. Yeah, again, I think that's sort of like the, you know, I don't necessarily fully agree with the idea of calling like sweating on the beta or whatever, because I think I've played in a lot of groups that have succeeded, of people who didn't really sweat on the beta or played very little, who are just good players. Like, I don't think I'm playing with a lot of people who are like, you know, high keyers who are not, like, who didn't play on the beta, who are just like completely getting owned. Like, it's mostly just a separation of people who are good and people who are
Absolutely.
not as good. I mean, again, this is like end game, very, very difficult content, right? Like, you should, like, unless you're an insanely skilled player or in a very organized group that's like learning from mistakes, you shouldn't be able to just pug like a +9 on the week 1.
Yeah.
It's one of those things too that it's like I found that like if I'm playing with good players and we get in voice, there's a lot that I can do to try to help them. Like, you know, really, we'll be like very coordinated in that way. And I found that no voice keys are so much harder than normal.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I think so, I don't remember who said it, but it was just like, these dungeons are just punishing. There's a lot of ways to die, but not only that, I think the biggest thing is that deaths are more punishing. Just in general, like, you lose 15 seconds. I am not timing a lot of my keys just due to deaths. Like 1 to 2 deaths on this pack, 1 death on this pack, like, they add up really quickly, and then you just run out of time to actually complete the key. And I think that's what I think I've identified as the biggest issue, is that it's really hard to carry somebody who may be not as skilled or not as knowledgeable in these dungeons because of that debuff. They stand in something, they die, you lose 15 seconds plus whatever time they're on the floor. And I think that's where I'm coming from, and that's what I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah,
especially
the death timer is absolutely massive, and I don't really know how to think about it. I still feel like they've had this problem since somewhere in Dragonflight, where it feels like the amount of damage that you take and the amount of HP the mobs have just isn't quite right. Like, I feel like you can actually get quite high up into keys. Not really, like, I don't want to say getting lucky, but, like, you know, if you don't have any bad overlaps, or you just kind of brute force the bosses and kill them before anything bad happens, like, you can actually just, like, if you just slam damage and just don't wipe, you just will, like, blast the keys timer, right? Like, even if you're not even that geared, you blast the keys timer, and I feel like a lot of people are getting, and that's sort of how M0s were too, in a way. Like, in M0s, you did kind of have to do the mechanics, but if you had a group of blasters and everyone was pretty geared, there's nothing else to do, you could just sort of like blast through and still only have like 45-second to 1 minute long bosses, unless you had people that were like, you know, really still learning or getting into things. And it's like, yeah, I feel like people end up a little higher than they should be. But the funny thing is, the death timer keeps them down in a way that's different from Dragonflight. Like, Dragonflight, you would go up insanely high, and you would just be like getting one shot by stuff and like trying to do like 20 ruby life pools and stuff. But the death timer is sort of like really, really keeping people down, which I don't really. Yeah, I'm still not sure how to feel about the death timer. One thing's for certain, though, that I really don't like, but again, maybe they like this and they want this, but like, because the scaling between HP and damage is so different. It feels like survivability and just like living stuff is so important. So like making sure that you have like a good geared tank and like bringing an Aug evoker and like not bringing like an under geared healer, like those sorts of things are so much more important than they are. I feel like this season's so healer dependent and so tank dependent, and it's like if you're a tank,
100%.
like now, if you're a tank and you do some stupid pull and you wipe the party, I mean, it's like literally minus 90 seconds off the key instantaneously. How many times in the last week where a tank, makes one little lapse of judgment where he messes up or pulls something he shouldn't, and then it's just bam, dead.
Yep.
Minute and a half off the key. And if you have a run back that's a minute and a half, like, dude, minus 3 minutes on some of these timers, it's like that's almost unrecoverable if that's like I was just saying that the keys are so free, but you 3 minutes is a lot. Like if that happens to you twice, that's a 2 chest into a deplete.
I don't think that people really recognized what I was saying whenever I was like, I'm pretty sure you just always want the top HPS throughput healer. That's why I was like only looking at Resto Shaman and Prez Evoker for like the top end keys. This is why. Like every single check in a lot of these dungeons is just like, can my healer out heal all of this garbage? And it's not that H-Pal necessarily can't. It's not that Disc Priest or Holy Priest can't. But they're gonna have a harder time than my Prez Evoker went to Burr, or my Shaman dropped Spirit Link Tota.
Yeah. I will also say I think these dungeons also have a lot more one-shot mechanics. Like, Arakara the timer is completely free. But that last boss is a pug killer. In a coordinated group, that is the easiest boss in there. You get stunned, you knock yourself out, you kick yourself out, and you're free. But pugs can't handle that boss, and it's a one-shot if you fail.
Well, also, they don't recognize the fact that poison does like 80% of the damage for the entire boss as well, and they're like incapable of dodging the waves if they ever get dispelled, whereas groups kind of know what's about to go down, right? Like in theory, you're supposed to dispel all the range and let the melee time out. That way the melee have like something that's like super, like they can see where those waves are going to be coming from, right? They're not going to be like, oh my god, I'm caught off guard.
Yeah. And then you have the machinist box, the rock elemental in Stonevault. If you just kill like multiple of those ads at the same time, you just blow up your group. Like,
oh, you're talking about Scumrax? Oh yeah, people do not know how the boss works at all.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how that boss works at all.
I was doing that dungeon with like people who get title, like hundreds of points above title every single week, who didn't know how that boss worked. And the demon hunter that we had in our group somebody that Growl knows. The demon hunter that we had in our group was not. He got the fucking damage buff to break the shield. They did 600,000 less DPS than the enhancement shaman on that boss.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of difficulty that comes from knowledge as well. And again, I don't know, maybe they like this, but like for example, the council boss in Stonevault, there's an overlap that happens in like, I don't remember if it's like 50 seconds or like a little after a minute, where it turns the vents on and it does AoE damage, but then there's a box that comes out and you have to be positioned very quickly to where that safe vent is, and you have to have a bunch of cooldowns popped. And it's like, how are you supposed to know that? Like,
that
unless
overlap.
like there is no way, like everybody who's listening to this either hasn't done it yet or has blown up to that and knows exactly what I'm talking about. Nobody naturally is going to be like it just happens so fast and suddenly that, and there's a lot of those like very, very weird sort of interactions too, where it's like you just have to literally blow up to it before you realize what you're supposed to do.
And I'm so thankful that I'm playing Aug, because on that boss in particular, I'm rescuing my fucking healer to the safe spot. I'm pressing Zephyr, and I'm getting the kick whenever the boss goes and does that box push. Every single time I'm going and getting that kick.
That spell queue that Growl was talking about is worse than intended, by the way. Some people may not have even seen or know what you're talking about, because that overlap is spell queued. There is a combination, and it ranges from time to time, where the vents go up a good 3 to 4 seconds before the box is pulled. That is very easy, because the vents go up, you go to the safe one, the box is pulled, you're already safe. There is an overlap where the vents go up after the box starts being pulled. So you have to evacuate the center, and then the correct vent shows up. And it's completely random which one you're going to get. It can be the very first one, and that makes that boss impossible to figure out what you're going to get and the difficulty of it.
All right, let's start talking about some of the easiest and some of the hardest dungeons that you guys have seen this week. I'm glad that they have Ascendant as the affix, because I think that that's probably the best one to showcase the new affix system, as it is the least annoying.
Ooh.
So there was this. This is a wowmeta.com, and this is like a data aggregate site where they are showing how many runs between 8 and 12 were timed, and they have Arakara, Mists, and Dawnbreaker as the easiest keys, and they have Stonevault, Grimbatol, City of Threads, and Siege as the hardest keys. Is that
sorry to interrupt. Can you change the range? Does it let you or no?
No.
Because I think 8 to 12 might be a little. I'd be interested in like just to see like the broader player base to see like
too high, you think?
Yeah, just and maybe click around or whatever. We can still talk about it, but I'd be interested to see like 5s to 9s because I feel like for most people, like okay, there's us who's like roll up with the boys, time a couple 10s, but I feel like for most people that are pugging right now, 9s is the promised land. Like once you're into 9s, you're getting the hero track gear, you're getting the gilded crest, you're working towards making your 636 item. I think most people are like 9s is like the end goal, and then you do a weekly no leaver 10. I think most people are like, not. I don't even want to say most people, but like the high end pug community. I think that's where they're at right now, and so I'm interested to kind of see that. I'm sure it's pretty similar to what's there, but
yeah, I want to start off by saying we thought Dawnbreaker was going to be impossible.
Yeah.
And it is one of the easiest dungeons right now. Nothing in there does damage, so much that when we hit it on a 10, I thought Fortified was bugged and not applying.
Well, it was nuclear fucking difficulty in the beta, so yeah, there was a reason. I put up a 35 death Dawnbreaker already.
Our first one.
Yeah, I don't want to say nothing does damage in there, but
okay, fair
I think
enough.
The nice thing about Dawnbreaker is I think all of the bosses are very straightforward and fair. There's no really nasty overlaps except for sort of the second boss. And you pretty like everything, all the mechanics are like pretty fair, and there's only 3 bosses. And most of the really difficult pull, like the underpass pull, you can just bloodlust it, and that makes it a lot easier. Yeah, I don't know. I do think Dawnbreaker is definitely one of the easier keys, but also I wouldn't even describe it as easy. I think that's just the difficulty of these current dungeons.
I think Borealis and Wake have been by far the most frustrating dungeons. Borealis is in a situation where the first area of trash in Borealis, you need to be like doing some big ass invis skip and playing none of that stuff. All that stuff is just way too hard at the very beginning, hits you way too hard. You can get better count elsewhere. I would just recommend skipping all that shit at the beginning. Wake is like this weird situation where I think that a lot of groups that don't save all of their lusts and all of their spears for Surge and Stitch Flesh wipe. Additionally, I don't like that they changed the timer and the amount of count that was required in that dungeon. They should have hit one of those things, but the fact that they hit both made that dungeon really, really weird going from the beta till now.
Yeah, they nerfed gatekeepers and buffed their count, and I'm pretty sure we're still not going to play those things. Like
those mobs gave like 6 count or something troll.
It was 15 and now it's 18, which I don't think that's enough of a buff to play them, but maybe I'm wrong there. But
yeah, I mean, I think maybe you pull one with lust in the beginning, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean the big thing about Necrotic Wake, we have to talk about Surge and Stitch Flesh. Like that guy is a menace, and there's obviously 2 ways of doing with it. And Tettle's released a video this morning about it. The first way being literally use everything on him, every spear, lust, cooldowns to kill him before he kills you, or the really, really slow way where you just focus Stitch Flesh the entire time. Oh, sorry, the Stitch with the ads, so that you only ever have 1 up at a time.
Focusing Stitch work ads are just fucking suicide, by the way.
People have done it.
They have too much HP realistically to do it like a high level, in my opinion.
Out of 10, it's perfectly fine. Like if people are stuck there, like focusing the Stitch list every time and just cleaving out of the boss does work. It is really slow, but it does work.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize, because if you're pugging, like you might like the groups that you're in when you're like, oh, you have to zerg the boss. You're in a group that saves Bloodlust, that has 3 spears, that has a good DPS, that knows how to press their button. Like you're gonna end up in a pug with people that like, oh, some guy chucked their spear at some random thing, and then some guy lusted the second boss, and like you may end up in a... I think it's important that people actually know how it works, and I think it's not obvious, because basically the way that it worked before was you'd always want to keep the stitch work guys, the A-bombs alive, because you could hook the boss. And if you ever had no A-bombs, you would just be sitting there and you'd be wasting time, right? And even at a high key, that's sort of true. The issue is they added a stacking debuff aura to those guys that the longer they stay alive, the more damage that they do. And so what's happening is people are used to never cleaving those or killing them because they want to keep them alive, but they're building up this huge aura, which gets to the point where by the time you're hooking the surgeon guy the second time, it's almost unhealable. Like you're needing like full healing CDs, defensives, everything to stay alive. And so if you don't have bloodlust, if you don't have spears, and like you know that you're not going to kill the boss at that time, then you have to kill the A-bombs, because if you can't, like, you're just not going to live. Like, you can't make that damage magically appear. So I'm not saying that killing the A-bombs is the correct solution, but if you end up there and you don't know what to do and you can't serve them or whatever, like killing the A-bombs is, I think, a viable way to go about it.
It is. It works, because realistically, the other problem with the dungeon is if you wipe on Stitch Flesh once and you throw your spears, you're kind of stuck up a creek. Like,
I know. I mean, it's always been like that. That's not new.
Right. It's not new, but it's still a problem in my mind. The fact that you have one chance on a boss, like, I think that's a problem.
Well, that's kind of Mythic Plus now, right? If you wipe to a boss, you're depleted.
Yeah.
Fair.
It's just how they want it to be in a high key, I think. I think last boss is actually going to get really, really nasty too. Maybe it's just the HP from everyone is so low. And that could be a big deal. People, like, as you get it to 630, whatever, like, everyone's stamina is going to go up. But, like, even, dude, the last boss we've done a few necrotic wakes, dude, the shield hits so hard when it stacks up. Like, if you ever just don't have healing or damage CDs and the shield gets to, like, 4 or 5 stacks, like, it's doing, like, 80% of somebody's health on, like, an 11 or whatever.
Yeah, I noticed that on a 10.
So it was in Shadowlands too.
Yeah, but in Shadowlands you had the hammers, right? That was the difference, is you would go to that boss with a bunch of hammers, and you would have the flesh crafter.
Yeah.
You can still get the flesh crafter up there if you want.
Do you think that, like, any other dungeons need nerfs? Like, and if so, like, what do you think still needs to get nerfed? Because we just had our first round of tuning, hitting Necrotic Wake and the last boss of City. Do you feel like anything else needs, like, what is the next up on the list?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, blocks damage in Stonevault, I think.
What is Stonevault?
Blocks AoE damage from the Dorito one.
Okay. I could see that.
I don't know. I don't know. I would almost feel like
to me, first boss, maybe, but like I don't love that one. I feel like that one's just like a nation check.
To me, I feel like it's a little bit too early for me to target individual things. Like, I would like to... I mean, I complained about it earlier. I would like to see dramatic, like, HP up, damage down across the board, and, like, make keys more about doing damage and make it not so hard to survive. But I'm trying to think of, like... I mean, there are some hard bosses, but...
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I think, if we're looking at, like, what levels people have timed right now, I don't think people are really that out of the order. Like, to me, I think the biggest problem is the damage to HP scaling, and then also there's just a lot of weird, very punishing overlaps. Like, for example, I think the movement, like, City of Thread's last boss, I think the swirlies and the damage and the movement is just a little bit too much. I think Siege, where the tentacles just slam you and knock you with the debuff, I think is a little bit too much. Some way to avoid that slam somehow. I don't know. Yeah, or like the box and Stonevault with the vents. Like, there's just a lot of very, very punishing overlaps and like stuff that if you didn't know it was happening. I don't know how you would do another. I mean, dude, just thinking about. I mean, there's so many hard bosses. Like, okay, second boss of Necrotic Wake. Now that everyone needs to lust and spear and do everything to third boss, dude, second boss gets really hard too, because that boss has so many required kicks. Because you have the two mages that have the frostbolt volley every 45 seconds. The Necrotic Wake bolt from the boss does like half of somebody's HP and puts a heal absorb while the boss is pulsing damage. Like, dude, we were just like, people were getting global in 2 seconds on that boss. Like, I was basically like kind of figuring things out, like where I need to use CDs and how much healing that I needed to do. And I felt like I just need to blast over healing on that fight and like constantly keep everybody topped, because someone can actually just get killed instantly on that fight.
Let me call out a bug on the trash of Necrotic Wake as well. You know that Necromancer pack that they added where the previous patrol of the mini-boss was going to be? They removed the Frostbolt Volley from all of the Necromancer mage spawns, except for that new pack, which still has it, and they just volley you on cooldown instant. I'm just like, dude, why is that even here?
Yep.
I think for me, I think the thing is, the Grimbatol Warlock curse is absolutely absurd amounts of healing. Like, it's basically curse dispel or die. I think for those Twilight Warlocks, that thing is insane, and it needs to be cut in half or like by 75% or something.
Oh, this is a nerf. It was cut. This is cut in half from what it was on beta at some point.
Jesus Christ! I saw it on M0. I'm like, I hope that doesn't scale it at Mythic Plus. Oh, it does. Oh, it does. And the fact that they can put it on you like 2 or 3 at the same person, and those packs exist is crazy. I think the other thing is, I hate the tentacles in the last boss because they're really hard to see with purple on a purple floor. But that's just a personal preference.
God, it makes me feel so good that you say that, because I submitted some feedback on the beta of what I thought was very critical, important things, and I'm like looking at Grimbatol and I'm like, where do I even start with this place? And the two things that I said were the most impactful were the healing absorb curses and the visibility on the last boss. And the thing about the tentacles, right, is it's not like if you hit a tentacle, it's like, oh, I took a bunch of damage, or like, oh, I lose a bunch of damage. Like, you're just dead. Like, it's just like when someone gets hit by a tentacle on that boss, it's either they're instantly dead or it's time dial, pain suppression, every heal, cooldown, blink, grip, and then, oh, we barely get him into the circle with 1 HP. Like, it is just so nasty. The fact that, like, and the boss is huge. Like, it's not even like, it's already hard enough to see stuff, and then the boss is huge. And we're like, there are situations where the room is completely full, and then we have like some character with an immunity that's like quote unquote clearing them, and I'm just like blindly following them, like praying that the tentacles are just gonna go away, because I have absolutely no way to run it. It's like, it's tough because like I don't know, every time we talk about these things, like I just see what they're going for and I know they don't care. Like, the thing is with the heal absorbs, like they just want you to bring curse dispels. Like, they want you to either not pull the warlocks with the lava benders, or they want you to bring curse dispels, and that's your options. They it's not meant to be healed off. Like, that last boss, it's meant to be, oh wow, this is chaotic and this is corrupted and I can't see, and oh no, and we're running all together, where do we go, like where's the safe zone? That's what they want. And so it's just like, I don't know. I just know that that's what they're going for, and so I'm like, I don't know. This is going to be a wild season of Mythic Plus. I think, actually, to be honest, in my opinion, if you're somebody who's like not taking things too seriously and just kind of like gaming and learning as you go, I think, again, you'll probably have a good time, and there's a lot of like really challenging, cool things that you can progress and learn. But I think for the people who walked into season 1 who are like, I deserve to get a time 10 for my vault, like I deserve to get KSM on week 1, good luck. Like, those people are going to have a really tough time in Mythic Plus in this season.
Stop change on our show notes. Who wants to monologue about this?
I was going to say something on it. I don't think the stop change is bad. I think it's perfectly fine. I don't have any issue with it. I was kind of ranting out about it before. I think the stop change is perfectly fine.
Yeah. I mean,
that was, as somebody with a fucking knock up and a pushback, what happens if you have a dog shit fear or an incapacitate?
I mean, there's only very few required kicks right now, and like I'm only talking from the 10 level. Like I'm not going for high keys with you guys or like you guys and stuff like that. But from my point of view, like stops are really good at delaying still. Like an incredibly good tool for delaying. And that can usually be done well enough that your kick comes up in time, or a kick comes up in time, because there's not that many required kicks in these dungeons at this level right now.
Yeah. So the big problem is very specifically casters that like recast bolt over and over and over again, like almost like archers except for casters. And the real dangerous ones are the 2 spider dungeons, the City of Threads, like the beginning area with all the casters, especially if you're pulling like the heralds, the big guys. And then also in Arakara, the beginning. Arakara is kind of free and you can just kind of go slow. You don't really need to pull a lot of casters except for like the big hauler area in between first and second boss. But City of Threads, you definitely run into some problems where you have just like, you're just like, dang, I really wish I could just AoE stop this, but it doesn't really accomplish anything. And yeah, I don't know. I understand. I think the biggest problem is like, the stops change is fine, but they're also just making us play so on rails. Like, you know, it's not like you can pull, like people just aren't doing these giant pulls with so many casters where you would need these stops, you know, like we're pulling 5 mobs at a time because the dungeons are so freaking dangerous that like, yeah, we don't need the stops because there's only 2 casters or 1 caster in the pull.
All right, let's talk about cool stuff we've seen this week. Again, cool, very subjective. Apparently there's a buff or a bug in Siege of Borealis with this middle pillar that if you drag Hadal Darkfathom through this middle pillar, you can actually send him to the Shadow Realm, and he despawns. He fell through the floor, as you can see on screen here, and immediately reset in our run. So don't drag him through the middle, I guess. What an epic bug, by the way.
You know, the cool, interesting tip that I'll just benefit from that. That statue, by the way, you can stand on that statue.
They fixed that. They fixed that.
For the frontal? No. I'm pretty sure
I thought you were talking about you can dodge the wave from any position just by standing on the statue. I don't know.
Oh, no. They fixed that one. I was talking about, there is a lineup now with double wave where there's a frontal at the end of it. That frontal will very likely be going to a safe spot. The frontal does not hit people who are on the statue.
Oh, that's useful. You used to be able to dodge the wave even if you were like standing in it by standing on the statue.
I know what I'm
but then they fixed that. Well, yeah. It was real sad.
Breakwater.
Yeah, okay.
Breakwater does hit you on the statue, but the frontal does not. So, in case of a bad frontal, hop on the statue. And then you're also not swimming if you're a no more dwarf or goblin.
All right, who's got other tips or cool stuff we've seen?
All right, my tip of the week. All right, I've been watching Dorky's offline chat, and I've been seeing the floods of people that are doing exclamation point routes and looking for the sickest routes to time this season's dungeons. The way that this season is constructed for you to play, they want you to go slow. They want you to pull 1 pack at a time. And obviously, at the high end of keys, if you're trying to do like high level stuff and go really fast, you're going to want to pull big. You're going to want to pull like these, 2 packs together, 3 packs together. But if you go into pugs and you're trying to do like actual routes and like, I don't know, like I've had so much more success in groups, like any group that doesn't have Dorky in it, basically, I've had so much more success just pulling 3 mobs at a time and just going in a straight line. And again, I don't think it's more fun and it's not how you do the highest keys, but if you're working your way up to getting a time 10, like you just save so much time by not dying. Like before there would be situations where like you would pull 2 packs together and then a bunch of people would die, but you would kill it and you'd be like, that was fine, we at least saved the pull. Now that's just completely like it's so bad. So play whatever you're doing right now, like just Blizzard wants you to play slow. They want you to pull 3 mobs at a time. Just do the dungeon like Ian Hazakosis intended. Like I think Grim Batol is a great example where everyone's like, this dungeon's so hard, but it's like, if you just pull 1 pack, literally 1 pack, all the way through the dungeon, you can still easily time it as long as your damage like isn't totally trolling. And again, like the bosses are a little challenging, but And I think like Dawnbreaker is like that, and people are very clearly seeing that with Dawnbreaker, I think, because it's such a short dungeon, and so people are kind of, everyone's scared of it, and it's a short dungeon, so people are willing to pull kind of smaller. But I think it's applicable to pretty much like every dungeon in the pool, where if you just go slow and don't worry about things, like you can basically have a lot better success.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my suggestion.
The number of deaths that I've seen or wipes that I've seen due to a 15-second chain attempt, it's caused quite a few party wipes. The mob's at 20%, you're ready to go in the next one, then your tank dies or like an AoE goes off because it's in the back. Like, it's just not worth it. Take the 15-second loss to not cause a 3-minute loss later.
Oh yeah, and there's been so many times where it's like tank dies and then like 2 people die and then there's like 2 people alive and then they're trying to keep the pull alive and then they're like running back and then the tank runs in, dies again, and it's like there's been so many situations where we'll lose like literally 3 minutes in a single pull, like just off of deaths. Like, we're talking about wiping to a boss being nasty, but like you can even do that on trash if you're playing stupid. Like, it sounds silly, but I think people aren't really putting into their heads quite yet how much like a death is. Like, using Shadow Meld or Vanish to get out of combat and save your team that 15 seconds, and like, or just not chaining like an idiot and like not releasing in the wrong time, like all those things will be really, really helpful to you as well. That's like kind of a good side tip, I guess.
Yep. I think for mine, I think this is new to Mists of Turn of Scythe, but the second boss has the dodgeball cast, where it puts a line, marks everybody's position, then you just dodge out of the way as it fires. That thing now hits the intermission ads, and it hits the fox as well. So if you will stack on top of the intermission ad and the dodgeball comes out, it'll do like 80% of its health.
Yeah,
which is crazy. I mean, I don't think that was widely known beforehand, but I found out this week.
It's
And
new.
it's really cool.
It's new, but it's pretty OP. Yeah. Okay, ready for Q&A?
Let's do it.
I think so.
All right, first question says, current healer questions. So just a healer question. How do I approach choosing trinkets, especially when they have different eye level? Usually I just follow the Wowhead gear guide and pick the highest one. Is there a general rule that what I am level, it makes sense to take lower tier trinkets? What do you think, Earl?
Okay, so as a healer, so you basically have to separate between M+ and dungeons. Or, I mean, M+ and raids. For raids, there's a website, Questionably Epic Live. That's basically where everybody, like, the closest thing you can do to healer simming. I think a guy named Volk runs it. He's, like, a guy who's in a lot of the class discords who's not cringe and very smart. So, for instance, what Tettle's just pulled up there, you can go to any healer, select trinkets. This is, like, approximations based off of logs and, like, how you should play. This will give you a baseline for how good a trinket is for healing, just pure healing, right? And so then for Mythic Plus, you need to factor in other things too. For example, damage, survivability, like does it do anything? So for example, like a trinket that is like just one big on-use heal, it's not nearly going to be as much HPS than a trinket that like splashes around and does a lot of healing. And in general, it's something that you kind of have to weigh out and figure out for yourself, like what you need. So for example, let's say you play a class like Disc Priest that might struggle, or Evoker that struggles with single target healing. You might value a trinket that gives you single target healing more, whereas if you play a class like Holy Priest that has really good single target, you might want a trinket that just does damage, or you might want a trinket that does splash healing to everybody or whatever. So there's not really a right or wrong answer. If you don't want to use your brain and you just want to copy people, I would just go on Raider.io and look at like the top 5 people of your class and just see what they're running and try and grab that and just not really worry about it. But in general, like if you look at the chart, the healing numbers of each trinket is going to be like pretty comparable. Like obviously there's like some outliers or whatever, but if you have the 3rd best trinket versus the 5th best trinket, it's like not really going to make any much of a difference really.
I will say in general, it's just like, just wear that top item level thing until you get the best trinket at like a comparable item level, right? And I think that you can just take like Brel said, like the 5th or the 7th best trinket or whatever. Wear that for a little while you either farm up or wait to get like the best trinket, and then you can just like use it as like a replacement tool. I wouldn't like people have like this insane expectation of always having like the best trinket at all times, and a lot of times you can just kind of wear whatever until you get that best trinket.
Yeah, I think, and also just like, I think seeing what people are running is just good as well. Like you just, farm the obvious stuff. Like don't be so obsessed with always making the right decision first. Like it's very often the case that 2 months in, people realize, oh wow, this trinket was way better than we thought it was, or people are like, oh, this actually works really well, and then you end up grabbing a trinket later on. So just kind of like keep a pulse on what people are running, and then just farm out the ones that are high on the list and go from there.
Okay. Next question from Mac. He says, a question idea I've had brewing is that I'm somewhat surprised not to see more. What if during the 0.5 patch, where they've been doing talent reworks for a few specs, they bump up the crest drop rate and put up like a Boolean/dinar system, so anyone who has bad luck could at least get that very rare item they've been dodging their vaults or free drops. That way, alts would also not be as miserable if they were as they were in Dragonflight if you wanted to grind them as your main status and having to grind 80 Mythic Plus to fully upgrade every slot and having non-cursed trinkets and weapons.
Before you guys answer this, I want to say this. I read this question and I thought it was very funny. The comment about how gearing alts in Dragonflight was miserable. Wasn't Dragonflight the best alt gearing expansion there ever has been in WoW's history?
Absolutely.
Okay, so anyway, you guys can field the question now.
You can go, Tattles.
I'm trying to think. I think that Blizzard would never actually do Booleans in the middle of a season. I think they've stated that multiple times. They're in a weird spot. I think that let people have also this weird preconceived notion that they should have 100% access to legendaries as well. We saw it with Narzuro and Fearlath. I feel like people's expectations for having Bisc gear has changed over time in a way that's not exactly healthy. But I don't know what you're actually supposed to do about that, right? Are you supposed to cave in and give unprecedented access to obtainable gear at any given point? Or are you supposed to like pull back on that? I don't really know what the answer's supposed to be. Like, would it be a cool system? Yeah. I think it would, make for a better play experience, but I think that it's kind of proven time and time again that, if you're able to complete your grind faster, player retention is worse. So I think from a Blizzard perspective, that's probably bad. But like, I don't know what you're supposed to do about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real question is like, what is the average person's progression like at a 0.5 patch? Like, I think for any of us here, our guild is done with the raid, our main is fully geared and like mostly full bis, and this change would be literal perfect for us because it would be like, okay, well, we can gear up whatever character we want if we feel like playing, right? Like this change is directly in like very, very good for us. If you're in Liquid or Echo, all your guys are max geared. If you're someone who's like more casual, like if you're still progressing, is this a good thing? Like if you're in a guild that's 5 of 8 Mythic, is this good that all of a sudden everyone can get bullions and whatever you want? Like, I'm not really sure. To me, I've sort of suggested something similar to this, where it's like at some point in the season, open everything up and just let everything be alt friendly. But like that's a change that's for me. It's it's not. I don't know how that would really go for the general population or whatever.
I think how I'm looking at it from like a personal perspective versus how I would feel about it as like a Blizzard, if I was working at Blizzard, versus how I'd feel about it for other people, I feel like those are very different, right? Because like from a personal perspective, I love this, right? If you're a second character that could be main ready for Mythic Plus, that's cool.
Yeah.
I think
is that healthy long term for the game though? And I don't really know.
Yeah, I think it's something that players want that the developers will never give. And I think there's a part of this question that makes me question something, and it's just like, have non-cursed trinkets and weapons. I'm struggling to see what those non-cursed trinkets and weapons are, because like, are we talking cantrips here? Like cantrips, sure, they're powerful, but I think especially at an alt, not being bis is kind of okay. If you have a 636 weapon versus a 636 cantrip weapon, or like the very rare Ansarek ring or something, like you're not going to be. You can play the game, is what I'm trying to say. I think a lot of people have this desire that if their alts aren't bis gear, they can't play it, or there's a goal there or something like that. But I don't think for alts we necessarily need to get there. But I do think some catch up can be good. Like right now we have the crest discount. I think in a 0.5 patch we could see maybe a crest drop rate increase or something. I think that's fair.
I think Blizzard has a gearing issue where people believe that they're entitled to having BIS everything, particularly with legendaries too. Where I just actually don't even know what the purpose of this is, because like, dude, what is a legendary supposed to be? You think about like what is a legendary supposed to be, and then you think about 100% of the evokers have the legendary, and 100% of the paladins had the Fearlath, and people were bitching that they didn't get it fast enough too. But there's also this issue because so many people also had it, right? And I don't really know.
No, yeah,
There's
like items have like a very strange situation right now. I mean, it's all over the place too.
like
It's
I
not
don't
even just-
blame. I don't.
It's not
blame
even just with
somebody who's-
acquisition, but it's like stats too, right? Like how boring are stats? Like
I
there's
agree.
4 stats on items. One of them is versatility, which is the most boring stat ever. And I mean, like, it's just like items are in a very, very, very weird place in WoW right now, where I think, unfortunately for people like us, we're so deep in the trenches that we're almost like not even really qualified to think about or like, because like I feel like we're just gonna min max and optimize and do everything with the items, and the itemize, like that whole system isn't even really made for us. Like we're just trying to game it to get as strong as we can right away. And if it was tournament realm and we just got all the loot right away and just to do the raids or whatever, like I feel like a lot of people would do that. Maybe they wouldn't, I don't know, but it's like I feel like if you ask players about items, we just optimize the fun out of everything and just want everything. And so I don't, that's a tough question for us to answer, as to like what,
Yeah.
you basically have like a sliding scale of like what is fun, right? Like I've had this debate sort of with Dorky multiple times, and he sort of like plays devil's advocate or just is an idiot and basically just wants everything to be tournament realm, right? Like he just wants to log into the game and have every single character full bis and be able to play whatever he wants all the time. But like I feel like for a huge chunk of players that would not be the most fun, and they would have significantly less fun if that was how the game was. And so I just don't, it's tough because it just depends on who you are, right? Like I sort of always talk about this with Mythic gear, where it's like, people who Mythic raid who are in cutting edge guilds love the fact that the best gear is from Mythic, but like, what if you had to be Hall of Fame to get the best gear? Then all of a sudden people would hate that. What if you had to do like plus, 15 keys to get the best gear? Like, people would hate that. Like, people always want the gearing system to be perfect for them, like whatever content that they enjoy and they're comfortable farming, that's the best gear, and no better gear can be gained in anything they don't want to do or is harder than they can do. And then like, but they still have a gear advantage over everyone below them. And it's like, yeah, loot is a very personalized and emotional subject that is tough to touch on.
Yeah, Blizzard made very rare items very rare for a reason. If they weren't going to be very rare, I think they would just be regular drops, and then they'd be easier to get. But I think most people, like as much as people want them, will be okay with a regular neck instead of that very rare neck.
Yeah, I mean that's what I always tell people when they're like, bring back dinars so that we can get the very rare items. It's like, well, that's the point. Like that's not the point. Like the point of the very rare items is so that not everybody has them. Like if you don't like the fact that you don't have that, then just remove those from the game. Like don't put very rare items on bosses. But clearly they're doing that, and so they're not. That you're asking for a solution to a problem that you've just created.
Yeah, we're not looking at like Incarnate Icon from Vaults of the Incarnates anymore, where that thing was bis for everybody. The upgrades now, like the neck off Rashanan, the Ansurek ring, those are nice, but I think most people will get on fine without them.
What about Spellslinger's Web?
That's a normal trinket. That thing is great, but yeah, I mean it's hard to get, right? Like, but you don't need to do anything super special for it. You can get it in your vault. You can get it from the time walking cache. You can get it from your weekly raids. Like, I think there are ample ways to get that aren't roll a very rare item, and I think that's okay.
Fair enough. Next question.
There's a whole bunch.
When was the time that you had the most fun in World of Warcraft? What specifically made it the most fun? And if it's not now, could it be recaptured in modern WoW? Squish, you want to fill this one first?
No, give me a sec to think.
I think
All right,
was the time that I had the most fun personally. I'll take this one then. I think it was something about just like the content basing, and like this was like my first foray, and I'm still progressing in terms of like how I'm getting into raiding. Mythic Plus has just come out, and I started to get like really good really fast in the middle of Legion at Mythic Plus, and I was having good success where I was like top 20 overall class in the world at or a top 20 overall player in the world for like 3 seasons of Legion, and I think I just had like unprecedented success in that regard. And I was just like having a lot of fun playing a bunch. Could be recaptured in modern WoW. I don't know, probably. I don't see a reason that I wouldn't be able to. I think that the reason that I had the most fun is because I was playing with my friends, and I was playing a lot with my friends, and I was having success while doing it. I do think that there was maybe some element that I don't know if it could be recaptured, because learning and growing as a player and becoming a lot better as a player in a shorter period of time is fun. So in that regard, I don't know if it can be recaptured. But I think in regards to like the just blanket playing with my friends, having fun in that regard, I do think that could be recaptured.
For me, the two most fun parts, I'll say the one that people are not going to like. I actually really enjoyed Hardcore Classic. I think that recaptured. That was the closest any game has and probably ever will be to recapturing what playing an MMO at the very beginning of online gaming was like. The fact that like the world was dangerous and that you cared about the relationships and like you had a connection to your character. And also BFA, like end of BFA Mythic Plus, and I think sort of similar to Titles in a way. Like, I enjoyed the rising up and improving. I enjoyed sort of like reaching areas that I've never been before. I enjoyed the people that I played with. And all of these things, funny enough, have nothing to do with the specific raid or the specific dungeons or like anything. It just has to do with like the community or the environment that it fosters. And I don't know if it can be recreated. Like, I think it would be very hard for, like, I think it could be recreated for other people. Like, I think there will be other people that get into Mythic Plus that fall in love and, really enjoy it and have the best season they've ever had. I don't know if it can be recreated for me, though.
Okay. I struggling to think of a really good one, but
You're like, wow, fun.
yeah, I mean,
I've always been miserable personally.
I think for me, a big part of fun was when I got into my current guild, Might, and kind of started getting into Mythic raiding for the first time. I mean, I've been in this guild for many, many years. I've known, my GM and some of these the raiders here for years at this point, and starting off and getting in Mythic raiding, getting my first CE and before it was called CE, I think. But I think that has been one of the most fun experiences I've had just over time, because it's led to a lot of hours, a lot of days, a lot of weeks of just fun with friends. And I know it's not exactly the question asked, but I think that for me, like, WoW is a big part of my life, and for me, it's just a great way to have fun with friends, lifelong friends.
New expansion launches, I will say, are always fun, though. I was a little bit emo in saying I don't know if it can be recreated. I feel like when everyone comes back to the world and like seeing people again and learning new things and like trying out all the different classes, I think that while it isn't the most fun I have, like I will say that the beginning of Shadowlands, the beginning of Dragonflight, the beginning of War Within, like all of these things are in my top 10 like WoW periods for sure.
I do have one more that I just thought of. So, when you play other games, there's always this period at the start of a game where no one really knows how to play, and like you're kind of just fiddling around. There's no such thing as a meta build. Like you're all just trying, like, ooh, this ability is cool, this item is cool, let me try it. We got that a little bit with Plunderstorm.
Ooh, Plunderstorm.
Where it was blind. People went in, like, there were obviously some leaks that went around and stuff like that, but even for those, like, you didn't really know exactly what was going on. And we went in, and it was kind of like, ooh, there's these preset abilities. What's going to be good? What's my build going to be? And you're going to try different things. And it was very quickly determined that Fire Whirl was the best by a long shot. But that time before the meta developed, and up until then, it was one of the most fun experiences that I've had in WoW in a very long time, because things weren't known ahead of time. Everybody just dropped in, You picked up some stuff, you tried it, you're like, I really like this axe button, that's cool. I really hate this, like cantrip ability or stuff like that. And you slowly start to develop your own preferences without there really being any kind of guides ahead of time or stuff like that, which I think is awesome.
Have you recreated for?
I think so. They'd have to do another secret thing like that, but I think they absolutely can. They have the technology, as they showed with Plunderstorm.
Do they have to do a secret thing, or do you just need to stop looking shit up?
Oh, yeah, he just said you fucking looked it up.
Well,
I was thinking, and I don't mean to call you out, right? Because we're all
fine.
the exact same way. I was thinking, like, I feel like it would be really interesting to imagine learning a class without anything. Just like making a warrior, getting level 80, and just all you do is you read your talents and you just see like what you come up with. You know what I'm saying? Like no rotation guide.
Can't read.
Yeah, true. Actually,
I
don't know. I feel like I don't know. I feel like we poison ourselves with that. And I don't know. Maybe just being competitive and knowing all this stuff and doing the mythic raids is more fun, but. I don't know, like, I guess the problem is what's cool about MMOs is having the people around you. And so, like, you feel dumb when it's like you're the person who's doing it and then everyone else around you is like, trying to play serious. But it would be like somehow if there was like a world where you could like play on a server where like everyone was just blind and like everyone would just do their own thing and like, you just go into it, it would be very, very fun, I think, to be in that sort of a world. But unfortunately, like, because you can look up guides and you can figure stuff out, like, everyone's going to, and then you sort of feel obligated to as well.
It's the same thing with like the whole like, oh, Echo and Liquid just make a gentleman's agreement to like not do splits and like not do all this cringe stuff. It's just not gonna work. It's not gonna happen. Like, it exists, therefore people are gonna do it.
I told Scripe that on Twitter, and he called me a fucking idiot.
You're so real for tweeting that out, by the way.
Yeah, well, because they're always complaining about it. I'm like, well, no one's gonna beat you anyway. Like, just do it. Like, just make a gentleman's agreement and do whatever you want. Like, and then stop complaining. I just think it's funny that I like the Race World First guys always go so hard, and then they're like, we hate this. It's like, well, stop doing it then. Or, like, you don't hate this. But that's another story. And he's right.
Stop looking up guides and stop practicing dungeons.
Fucking idiot.
Hey, dude, if I made a Zero to Hero series where I just didn't look anything up, the problem is like Twitch chat would spoil it, and so I'd have to do it off stream. Like, could you imagine if you tried to play a class with like 1,000 viewers or whatever that you didn't look up? People would be like, "Oh my god, why aren't you gem crit? Like, why are you have this? Why are you running this talent? Why are you running the wrong hero talents? Like, why are you pressing this? This button's up. Like, you're not supposed to press this in this window." Like, you literally couldn't even try and learn a class live. I think it would just be too hard.
All right, ask you a question. From JJ Bunny, they ask, can somebody explain why high-end players just want all roles reduced to DPS? It seems like lots of them want tanks and healers to do more damage and not worry about healing or threat. Most people picked tanks because they wanted to be hit in the face in group content. Healers also didn't care about doing damage. They wanted to keep people alive. Oh, wow.
All right, I'll start this one as well because I like yapping about this. So first of all, everyone's a DPS at heart, and they probably just had to switch to tank or healer because they can't find groups. That's like half of tanks and healers in the first place. But so the thing about healers is that everyone wants to be challenged, and so what's the problem is if I want to be challenged as a healer, let's not use me, let's use J.B, right? In order to make a dungeon challenging for J.B, it has to be absolutely miserable for you. Like, if for to actually challenge J.B and his nerdy like main group of European key pushers, it is going to be the most miserable experience that you've ever been a part of, right? So the problem is you can't have a healing challenge that's interesting for JB and then also fun and interesting for you. So like you're saying, oh, all I want to do is heal, but like what that means for someone like JB is like, okay, well, I'm healing 25% of the time and then 75% of the time I'm just standing there doing nothing. And so like That's the hard part with healing, I think, and also as you go into higher level group content, like damage is always matters, and like doing stuff faster, killing the boss faster, and the timer faster matters. But I mean, I don't think necessarily people want everything to always go to damage. It just sort of goes that way in itself, right? Because like that's what you do with any free time. Is you like if you're a tank, what would you rather do? Would you rather survive? Like, if you could survive with like higher damage gear, then why not just survive with higher damage gear? Like, it's understandable if you're just, if you're in a key level with lots of room to spare, why you would just, I'm going to play a little bit safer with this build. That's a total normal decision to make. But when a high end player is like trying to do the fastest key that they've ever done, like doing a little bit more damage is going to allow them to do that, right? So it just, I don't know. It's not. I don't think we necessarily want it. It just has to happen.
I think that's about right. And I think we've talked about threat before, but I don't think threat is just punishing DPS for threat failures is just not fun. I think that's the long and short of it. And that's why if threat is an issue, it is a very just suddenly not fun mechanic, and something likely needs to happen.
Well, dude, my tank not having threat, it doesn't become a them issue, it becomes a me issue.
Wait for 3 Sunders.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, right? Is it's like, again, for a threat to be challenging and intriguing for Squishy, who's like looking up guides and getting the right gear and like knows all the mechanics, he's pressing all the buttons right. Well, then how's it going to be for you? It's going to be miserable. Like for someone who's more casual, who isn't like doing all of the things right or doesn't have the best gear, there you just won't be able to keep threat, right? So either Squishy's going to get bored because he has threat easily, or you're going to find threat being impossible. It's just like there's varying degrees of skill, and I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that for a huge percentage of players, you're not at that level where you need to push every edge, and you should be willing to play how you want to play and how you think is right. If you're a tank and you think, hey, doing 20% less damage is fine, I like being safer or the same as a healer, like I think that's 100% correct. And I think that you shouldn't, if some guy, like, I think a lot of it's in people's heads. Like, I think I see that a lot from healers where they're like, oh, I need to do damage, or like, why is my damage low? It's like, dude, you're in a +7. Like, who cares? Like, you think your team is not flaming you for having low damage as a holy priest. Like, they're flaming you because they have 56 deaths in Dawnbreaker. Like, it has nothing to do with your damage. Nobody cares about your damage. I think it's like mostly in people's heads that anybody except for like, cutting edge content really cares about that.
Especially with the death timer now, I think more than anything.
Yep.
Tanks surviving, just even going double defensive trinkets, healers purely healing, no one's going to bat an eye. The time that you would gain from going somewhat damage oriented is maybe at tops a minute, and you could lose up to infinite amount of time. I'm never going to put a number there due to failures from your tank dying or your healer not healing people. Yeah,
I've been known to call tanks idiots in the middle of raids for after I look at their trinket and when I see them die. Because I just, like, even in, like, a very high-end guild, right? I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, if you're ever dying and you're running some stupid damage trinket instead of a cheat death or a defensive trinket, like, what in the world are you doing?
My favorite is the prot warriors who, in the middle of tanking a bunch of mobs, start casting Beacon from Beyond and lose all their block value and die immediately. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Classic.
Average tank, honestly. Okay, I think that's going to be it for us this week. Any final thoughts? Any final words?
I screwed up the recording. Hopefully Squishy got it right.
Well, I hit record, and it's still working.
Great.
So if you can hear us by the end of this, we did it.
Just know that if you got this far, we're very happy for you, and also we're very happy for us because it's a miracle.
All right, well, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.